Hey guys, it's Chriselle, and I wanted to do a wrap up of what's been happening writing wise. If you've been following along, my writing journey has been quite lengthy. I have been working on a number of different projects for an embarrassingly long time now, but I think every writer goes through that. Everyone writes, numerous projects, and those projects are basically you learning how to do the craft and getting to the work that you think will actually be the one that can be published or can be, self-published if that's the route you're deciding to take. So I started writing Before You Called Me Baby. That is the working title of the romance novel that I pivoted to in 2019. I had been working on fantasy for about 10 years and fantasy YA as well. And as I was writing these things, I actually did try querying one of the novels. At the time I felt that it was as good as I could make it, and I didn't intend to self-publish at the time. I started the process, and in doing that process I realized that that novel was not what I originally wanted it to be, but I was also not there yet. I hadn't achieved the level of self-awareness, self-development, I guess, as a writer to feel confident with writing that novel. Originally, what I really wanted to write was a fantasy romance, and I realized in querying that what I had done was removed most of the romantic elements in order to meet genre standards and sort of like market conventions in order to make this more marketable to a traditionally published audience. I didn't really want to do that. I realized that as I, sort of like shut down a part of myself in writing this book, and in every edit more and more of those elements disappeared, I wanted to go back and rewrite that novel. But I wasn't there yet. At the time I was actually working on the second draft of another book that also was a historical fantasy type story, but with a YA element. And there too, as I was writing it, I was like, you know what, I feel like what I want to write is romance, and I'm just somehow stopping myself. Not because of any stupid reasons of romance being lesser than or anything like that, but a part of me was convinced that if I decided to write a genre that I love, that somehow I would lose my love of the genre. I don't know why I thought this. I genuinely convinced myself that this was a thing. And I had to kind of like unlearn that. I think part of it goes back to being in grad school and being told constantly, like, anything that you work at in academia for a certain amount of time, you're going to get pigeonholed in that, and you're going to have to either learn to love it or you're going to eventually grow to hate it. And I didn't want to grow to hate romance because that is sort of like my happy genre. It's the genre that I've been reading most excessively throughout the whole pandemic because it's the one that brings me joy. So I realized that what I would like to eventually do with all those other manuscripts that I have is completely rewrite them as what I always wanted them to be, which was adult fantasy romance, which is a much bigger market in self-publishing that I wasn't really ready to go into. So, very long story to say that what happened is that as I set these books aside, I had this idea that just popped into my brain, and it's one of those things where, like, it's so cliche to say, like, this came to me in a sudden flash of insight or something, but that's exactly what happened. I had this idea. I saw this girl in a bar in Knoxville, and she liked a boy, and I was like, that is the story. That is the story that we're going to write. And I stopped working on my NaNoWriMo project in 2019. It was that draft that I was working on. It was a second draft. I was nano-rebelling, and I said, nope, we're going to pivot and do a completely different book. Genre I have never sat down to write before, which was contemporary romance, but a genre that I know really well because I read so much of it. So I pivoted entirely, wrote up the outline, and that book came together so easily in a way that no other book has ever come together for me as far as plot. Now, I'm not saying the book is perfect or that it didn't need a ton of work and developmental edits and content editing. Every book needs that, and whatever happens from here on out, I know it'll get edited again. That's just the way it is. But this book came together with such ease in terms of like me connecting with the characters and putting parts of myself into the story, parts of my own, you know, history into it, just things I know, stories that I've heard, stuff like that, and just, you know, inspiring these different moments and just putting this plot together. I have not had to do the level of developmental editing for this book that I've had to do for previous manuscripts, I will say that. Just because, as I said, the plot just came together in a way where it just made sense to me logically to move from one point to another. And I'm sure there's stuff that, you know, if it ever gets into the hands of a traditional editor, will probably have to change and be moved. Obviously, I get that. But it just came together so naturally for me, and it felt so right, and I was so eager to get this going. So it's the book I've been working on since 2019, with some exceptions. So I wanted to dive into how long this has taken to write, because I think that's something that sometimes gets just not really mentioned when it comes to writing progress, like the actual minutia of how long it takes to write something. When you think of like NaNoWriMo, you think of the 50,000 words in 30 days. But writing isn't always like that. You don't always get to that kind of a goal. Sometimes you have to have breaks, sometimes things happen, sometimes life intervenes. My life intervened a lot. So I actually track my time. I track every sprint that I do, and I track every minute that I spend writing or brainstorming or editing or revising or line reading or whatever. I track it. It's a little obsessive, but that's what I do. I always have spreadsheets. Now, I don't have a spreadsheet for the NaNoWriMo one because I did track that in NaNoWriMo, which doesn't necessarily track hours, it just tracks your words. So I don't have the time to get to that 50,000 words. But I do have all the other stuff up to now. I am currently at what I call draft 4.5. I have set the book aside for now. I'm going to come back to it and do proofreading. That's the stage I'm at now. I did my first draft, which was, you know, like my dirty draft, my throw everything in there and see if it sticks type of a draft. I did a major read through, give myself feedback, go through it, edit the thing, huge developmental edit. Then I did like another round of developmental editing, which is where once I've like put the pieces in place, I go back, I read it again, I outline it to make sure that the pieces are where they belong, move some stuff around if they don't. And at that stage, I then went through and gave it to my betas. I did do an update on this. I found like 7 betas, but only 2 actually followed through and actually gave me the feedback. It was good though, because they both confirmed the stuff that I already suspected. I will say that I am very critical when it comes to my own writing, so I know what to look for, and I'm not easy on myself. So a lot of what I already suspected was needing to be done, they confirmed. So I went through and I did some more editing based on their feedback. So I did sort of like one major developmental, one check on the changes developmental edit, and then one go back and develop the content further based on beta feedback. Now that's kind of where I'm in between right now. I have already also, following the beta feedback, I went through and did the like minor content editing where I do the sentence level stuff, the, you know, is this the right word for this? And then I did a major find and edit excess words that are unnecessary, crutch words, those little sticky glue terms, or there's different ways of calling them, but like the words that you can literally take them out and the sentence will still be the same, words like that. I use that a lot. I did not get all of them out, but I tried. So it's been intense. So I have the time that it has actually taken me to go through this. And I've been tracking these since draft 2 started in 2020. I did not get to draft 2 until like 2 months into the pandemic, because your girl just could not. I could not. So I didn't actually start draft 2, the actual content of it, until sometime in March. So in February 2020, I did the read through, because that's, you know, what I was doing. I finished draft 1 in January. I started the read through in February, and then things went crazy and I didn't do much of anything. So in March I have 35 hours that I spent writing, and then it's like 35 hours here, 23 here, stuff like that. I basically completed draft 2 at 230 hours, which is a lot. I imagine draft 1 was a little bit shorter because I fast draft, whereas developmental always takes longer. That's another just reality of writing. Your editing will always take longer than the doing. Same thing with video editing. Like if this video is 15 minutes long, it will take me a solid like 50 or 60 minutes to edit the thing. It always takes longer to edit because you're being more critical of what you're actually doing. Whereas like when you're just writing, you're just throwing all the ideas in there. So 230 hours to get through, actually no, 117 hours to get through draft 2, 230 once I got through draft 3 as well, because it kind of like started mid-year. So 230 hours were spent writing between draft 2 and draft 3, and then draft 3.5, which included reading the thing, getting the beta feedback, reading it again myself, figuring out where the edits needed to go, was 126 hours. And now draft 4, which was really July, August, September, and we're currently October as I record this. I have just finished that like small sentence structure edit. This is pre-proofreading again. Up to this stage, I've spent, not including October, 42 hours. So when I did the math, I added all these hours up and I kind of like divided it by 24 and got 16 days. So if I had worked for 24 solid hours every day writing like some sort of machine, because that obviously is impossible for anyone, it would have been 16 days total. It took me to write from draft 2 through all the way through draft 4. Obviously, it wasn't 16 days that it took me to do this. It took me about, at this point, a year and a half, essentially, to write it, because we're coming up on the second NaNoWriMo year, excluding the month that I took off just to let my betas read it and to get away from the draft, excluding the like 3 months where I could barely look at the book because my brain just wasn't thinking of anything beyond not catching a deadly virus. Excluding all that mess, it probably was about a year and a half to get here. And as I said before, it is the most straightforward writing process I have ever had. I will also admit that that's probably because I've spent 10 years writing other books and have learned something from that. So I now know exactly what kind of sprints work for me. I know the times of day that work for me. I know that every month I'm going to lose a solid week to migraines, so I plan for that. I am also aware that my editing takes longer and what that has to look like and what kind of like environment I need to be in order to concentrate to do that. So all those years of working on all those other drafts that have yet to see, you know, much beyond a couple of beta reads and the you know, like sample pages that were read by agents, all that taught me what I needed to get to today. And I think that's just the reality of writing. You might sit down and write your first nano novel. It's never going to be perfect. It might not be the book that gets out there. Even the novel that I queried was definitely not the first novel I wrote. That was like the third novel that I actually wrote. So I just wanted to come on here and say that writing takes time, and this is what it looks like. And it should look like this. It should not be something that gets, you know, just shelled out so easily. I think there's this extreme desire in our, you know, Western culture especially, to hustle and to do more and to just squeeze in every minute you can. I can't do that. I have days where I just can't get through the brain fog of my chronic health issues, so I don't write. So I will admit there are days when I don't write, there are weeks when I don't write. So either way, I'm able to complete the project. And I just wanted to, you know, give you all some hope if this is what you're going through. If you're writing a novel and it's taking forever, it's a long process. Even if you're already established and you're, you know, fast publishing, sometimes you have bad months, sometimes you have bad years. Things happen and there are delays and it takes time. But if I could literally write for 24 hours a day, apparently I can shell out a book in 16 days, which is amazing to me. So that's That's what I have discovered through my obsessive tracking of words and hours spent writing. I actually did stop tracking words. I don't track the words when I edit because there's just no way for me to track it. But I do that when I'm just fast drafting. I do track the words. I do not track after I start editing because it becomes impossible. But it's a fun exercise to do because it allows you to look back and see your progress even though it feels like nothing is happening. That's where we are. So next month is NaNoWriMo, and I have been paralyzed with indecision about what to do. I obviously want to finish proofreading the novel because I do have to tell myself, you know, the project that I have right now is the project that I want to see out there in the world. Whether it's traditional, which is the route that I intend to take, if that doesn't work after a certain amount of time, I am intending to just give it to a developmental editor and try to self-publish it myself. But I would rather go traditional for many reasons. I won't get into it here, but that's my intention for this. As I said, I do also plan to write fantasy romance, which is much more marketable in a self-published environment, so I'm not averse to the idea. It's just not quite what I want for this one if I can go traditional. But that's a whole long story for another day. But in the meantime, I am debating what the heck to do for NaNoWriMo because I kind of have hyped myself up to do it. I haven't done it in a while because I've been working on this one project. I kind of want to do it, and I have a novel that I want to write, and I have a little bit of it outlined, not like formally, just like very loosely, but I'm eager to get to it, but I'm also eager to get this book out into queries. So somehow maybe NaNoWriMo will look like a combination of both those things, or maybe neither, who knows. Either way, I've got to proofread the darn thing before I can actually send it to agents. I have queries and synopses and all these bits and pieces in various stages of readiness, so that also just like needs to get fixed and done. But we'll see. I don't know what the future looks like for the next, few months. Work is also a hot mess, so there's that. I have no solid goals is what I'm saying. I have an idea, but not much of a plan, and that's the best I can do right now. So there's that. So that is what my writing situation looks like right now. If you're working on a project, please let me know down below how it's going. Share your feedback, share your thoughts, share, what's your process look like? Because everybody's process is different, and it's nice to see what other people's process looks like because you can get ideas that might improve your own. So go ahead and let me know what you're doing, how your endeavors are going, and we'll maybe check in for NaNoWriMo, but no real solid promises there. So I'll see you guys later. Addendum. I also wanted to hop on and say, if you have not noticed, I have added my pen name to my YouTube profile. My pen name for this novel is Emilia Grace. I picked it for various sentimental reasons, and because I have been participating in writing groups online under that pen name, things got confusing sometimes when I would be like on writing sprints and the writing sprints would move to YouTube. So I decided to just add the pen name onto YouTube. People were confused. They thought I was two different people when I was always one person with a fake name. So that's why you will now see Emilia Grace attached to my actual name. Just so we're all on the same page. Also, I whipped out the ring light for you guys. So I really hope the video quality is better than it has been in the past because I'm still learning how to use this darn thing. But it is also a very cloudy day and I did not want to be washed out in shadows. Although, shadows are great too.